We've all heard time and time again how nutrition is important for good health for everyone, but this is especially true for those undergoing cancer treatment. Eating healthy foods before, during, and after treatment can help you feel better and stay stronger, and is more critical to the process than you might think. Hi, everyone. I'm Tamika Bickham, your host for today's discussion, coming to you live from the Baptist Health Newsroom. And we have two Baptist Health experts joining us today to talk about some interesting facts on nutrition in cancer care and a cancer survivor who wants to share her journey with us. First, I'd like to welcome Natasha Barajo, wellness dietitian at Baptist Health Miami Cancer Institute, Rosemary Carrera, founder of 305 Pink Pack and our breast cancer survivor, and also Chef Edgardo Llopis, executive chef at Baptist Health Miami Cancer Institute. Pleasure to have you, Chef Eddie, Natasha, and Rosemary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you for being here. So before we dive into today's subject, I want to remind our viewers to go ahead and send in your questions and comments throughout the show. We are here for you and happy to answer any questions you may have. So let's go ahead and dive into today's discussion. This first question is for you, Natasha. Some people might be surprised to learn that your diet changes when you are going through treatment. How are the eating habits of someone undergoing cancer treatment compared to a regular diet that most people follow?
Sure, no, absolutely. That's a great question. So really, when you first ask that question, what comes to mind is somebody undergoing cancer treatment needs to be more mindful. So really what I like to say is you need to be more purposeful with what you're going to be eating, right? I think a lot of us, wake up and I got to get the kids off to school or I got to get to work and breakfast is a second thought. So really our nutrition takes a back seat. Undergoing cancer treatment, really that nutrition needs to be brought to the forefront. When am I going to be eating my meals? When am I going to be cooking my meals? When am I going to be grocery shopping? So really being more mindful of the whole process is really, I believe, the most important habit someone undergoing cancer treatment should be starting with.
Absolutely, being more mindful. So I want to kick off this next question here to Rosemary. As our cancer survivor, I'm sure you went through so many changes and emotions throughout your journey, and maybe being mindful is one of those as well, as Natasha just mentioned. So what surprised you the most about your diet during and after treatment?
Well, what surprised me the most about my diet during treatment is how closely it resembled to my pregnancy diet. I became really intolerant of the same foods like eggs and beans, and I found that I could only eat ice cream and popcorn on my bad days. Also, the amount of water that I needed to drink was easily over a gallon a day, and my body was still asking for more. On my good days, I try to eat as healthy as possible, and after my treatment, I've really focused on being more vegetable forward and incorporating vegetables into every meal. I also try to eat as few meat as possible, so our meals usually have fish as the protein.
And was that shift to eating more vegetables, more fish, as you mentioned, was that hard to cut out certain foods and make that shift?
Well, I thought that I was eating a fairly healthy diet before I was diagnosed. And then when I really started to look at it, I found that I didn't have as many vegetables in my diet as I should be having. Cutting down on red meat and white rice was also a bit of a challenge. Coming from a Cuban background, those are two very integral parts of our meals. But you can certainly make changes that don't stray too far from the flavors. So now I'll often substitute cauliflower rice, especially when it's something saucy, or even do a picadillo with portobello mushrooms instead. It's not the same, but it's close. And you have to give yourself a break too. So when I visit my grandmother's house, all the rules go out the window and I just let myself enjoy it.
Absolutely. It's all about balance. But to put this in perspective, just to follow up on one more question, one more point that you made, Rosemary, you mentioned you thought you were eating a lot of vegetables before. And during and after treatment, how did that change? Like, can you put in perspective how many vegetables you were eating?
So I made it a point to really incorporate vegetables into every meal. So we started having spinach or kale or arugula salad with breakfast every day. Same thing goes with lunch. Often we'll have a vegetable soup for lunch, and for dinner, lots of vegetables, even incorporated with pasta. So it was just an active effort to make sure that there was something at every meal, and if I could throw in a snack throughout the day too, that was very helpful. But when you stop and write it down, say, okay, where are my vegetables on a daily basis? You realize that you really don't have as many as you should be having, and it's hard to get creative sometimes, but you can make an effort.
That's a great point with writing it down, because sometimes when you can actually see it and you're actively tracking it, you know where you need to make some of those changes and adjustments. This next question is for Chef Eddie. It can be challenging for some people to change their diet after being used to eating a certain way for such a long time. So, what are some ways of incorporating more healthy options into your diets, especially when there are restrictions during chemo?
So like Rosemary said, when I guess in a lot of our Latin culture, I will go with that. It's very hard for us to like incorporate vegetables and stuff like that. Like me, especially growing up, we didn't eat too many vegetables. What we consider vegetables were a lot of starchy vegetables like yuca, corn, and peas and stuff like that. So it's a matter of readapting yourself. Like Rosemary also said, you're accustomed to eating rice, but it's actually if you're gonna make a congri, which is usually a typical rice that's made in Cuban culture, you will make it instead of white rice, you will use a whole grain rice like brown basmati rice or red jasmine rice or a whole grain rice. I think the whole purpose here is using what you already know and readapting those recipes, utilizing ingredients that are going to be much beneficial for your body and that are going to be very high in fiber and stuff like that to help you, digest and get all the proper nutrients that your body is going to need in order to fight diseases and make sure that you stay healthy.
Absolutely. Some great tips there. Thank you. Now, Natasha, we've heard in the past that sugar feeds cancer cells. Is this true? And are there any other foods that feed cancer?
So it's a little bit of a loaded question. I think it's best to first clarify sugar, right? So we have the natural sugars that occur in our fruits. I want my cancer treatment, prevention, survivorship patients all eating fresh fruit with sugar. What we need to avoid, and when we see this, feeds cancer, we're really talking about the added sugars. We're talking about the table sugar, the honey, the syrups, those things that we add to a dessert, a soda, where we tend to find the most sugar in our American diet. So those are the sugars we want to be avoiding, and not the natural sugars that occur synergistically with other nutrients like in our fruits. We also want to keep in mind, and Rosemary kind of made a point of this, we want to try to start limiting meat. It's high in saturated fat, but just all meats in general, anything with feet, we want to start limiting and cutting back on. We also want to be able to cut, if we can, especially processed meats that are cured, where things are added that are known to be carcinogenic. So we definitely want to avoid those. And if we can, we also definitely want to limit salt as much as possible. So going on a low sodium diet, maybe seasoning with herbs and spices instead. Those are the things that I like to recommend.
Awesome. Some great tips there. Now, Chef Eddie, an important part of eating healthy is reading the labels and understanding what we are putting in our bodies. Are organic foods better for reducing your risk of getting cancer? And separately, how is it better for cancer patients?
Well, how they say, you are what you eat. I think that really applies to what we put in our bodies. Like Natasha was saying, refined sugars and stuff like that, anything that's added. It is very, when I started my career as a chef, we didn't really read a lot of nutritional labels or ingredients in a lot of products. We tended to cook a lot and just not read, just go, 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 go. So when I started in the retirement village that I was working at prior to coming to Baptist, I learned that it was very important to read the nutritional label and the ingredients that are in every product that we utilize, because there's a lot of chemicals actually that go into the foods and ingredients that actually are not healthy for the body. So when you're looking for any product out there, you want to make sure that it's something that you actually recognize. So if it's rice, it needs to be rice. If it's salt, it needs to be salt and stuff like that. Staying away from sodium nitrates and nitrite and all these other things. Is just, if you read a word in the nutritional label or the ingredients that either says added or something that you cannot pronunciate, then you shouldn't be eating it or consuming it, because it's actually going to be very harmful for your body. So yes, I believe that eating organic products like fruits and vegetables and all those other things are very important, because you limit or reduce the chances of actually consuming something that has any pesticides or anything that was added to it, and that may harm your body as well. So anything that is natural, that hasn't been altered or anything like that, is non-GMO, should be the best thing that you should be consuming to make sure that your body stays healthy and that you're able to fight any diseases, and also keep your body from developing new diseases.
Great points. So organic foods are better for cancer patients. And also looking on that label for anything that says added, or as you mentioned, maybe something you can't pronunciate.
Correct.
Thanks, Chef Eddie. Now, Rosemary, I'd like to dive a little bit more into your story. Can you tell us a little bit about how your diet changed throughout your cancer journey?
Sure. So when I started treatment, since chemo affects everybody very differently, you really don't know what you're getting into until that first session. So it was trying to prep with lots of healthy foods, eating lots of vegetables. I made a lot of soups that I could store easily and just take out when I needed them. But really what I found myself doing was that on the days that I just could not eat because I just felt too sick, was just eat what I could. And while I was in chemo, I met with a nutritionist while I was getting my infusion done. And they were fantastic because they said, okay, these are the side effects that you're experiencing. These are the foods that will help you combat that on those days. And so for those days, it was about maintaining that specific diet that would help counteract those effects. And then eating things that just helped me feel better, while on the good days, trying to eat as healthy as possible. And really what you're eating starts when you're shopping, because going back on what Chef Eddie says, when you're at the grocery store, try not to go through the aisles. Go on the outside. Yeah, all the real food is on the outer ends. They'll get you on the inside. So stick to the outer aisles, and that's where you're going to get your most fresh products and cleanest products.
Great points. I like how you mentioned, hey, on the good days, eating the best that you could. I think a lot of us, a lot of times think about the good days when we're happy or we're celebrating, we're feeling good, wanting to indulge. Did you ever have that feeling? And if so,
Yes.
what did you do when that came up?
Absolutely had that feeling. When those good days are celebratory days. So, I'd give myself like a meal from time to time where I could just have like a fantastic cheeseburger, but I made sure that it was a really good quality cheeseburger and not something that was questionable where the meat came from. Making even simple choices like that, so that when you do indulge, you indulge on the best possible version of that meal. And then I really do love vegetables. So I love finding restaurants and recipes that really make the flavors of the vegetables stand out rather than hide them and trying to make them into something that they're not. So I won't eat things like the fake meats, like the Impossible Burgers, stuff like that, because I find that it has so many additives in it that it takes away the point of it being a vegetable.
Great points. Thank you for sharing that. And Chef Eddie, some people think that eating healthy can be quite expensive and it might not be in the budget for them. So what are some ways that people can start to incorporate healthy and clean eating in their diet without breaking the bank?
Well, first, I think it depends where you shop. That's a good place to start. But I don't think it's as much as expensive as people think. It depends, how you plan yourself out and what you're gonna create. Like Rosemary said, meal planning is a very important factor of that. And also learning how to incorporate the same ingredients into different applications. Like let's say, for example, if you get a 5-grain rice, then you can make just plain 5-grain rice with some vegetables on the side and whatever protein you're gonna have, either a chicken or a fish. And then you can also use that same 5-grain rice to make like a quinoa fried rice with some vegetables and then add it to a soup. So it's using one ingredient that might be expensive and spreading it out into 2 or 3 recipes that are actually going to give you a selection so that you don't get bored of eating the same thing. Let's say, for example, just steamed rice, broccoli, and maybe a chicken breast.
Wonderful. Rosemary, do you have any tips on how you started making that adjustment and we're kind of keeping an eye out on costs with your foods as you were shopping?
No, I agree with what Chef Eddie says. Everything that he recommended, but also don't let things go to waste. If you see at the end of the week you have leftover vegetables, leftover things, freeze them or throw them into an Instapot and make a veggie soup, because those are things that will always come in handy. So just try not to let things go to waste.
Great tips as well. And Natasha, taking care of your body after treatment is so important. Is there anything people should or should not eat post-treatment?
So I would say, definitely the shoulds is maintain the habits that you created undergoing treatment. You want to take that into survivorship. So you definitely want to keep all of those whole grains that you were eating, the brown rice, the wild rice, the whole wheat pasta, if you're going to do something like that. I want to see those beans. I want to see the fruit. I want to see the vegetables. So you're going to want to maintain those items in your everyday diet. And then again, you're going to want to limit the added sugar, the meat, maybe limit your portion. Don't think, you really have to ask yourself, okay, what am I most easily going to do? Am I capable of having a meal without any animal protein? Or can I take an ounce off my 8-ounce steak and have 7 ounces instead? Think of those things as wins. You had less. All right, it wasn't a plant-based meal, but you still had less than what you used to have. So think about little baby steps that you can take in that healthier direction. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing. We really need to find what works for us. We also, again, want to limit that salt intake. So is it one less dash of salt, on those French fries or whatever it might be? Or could it also, be avoiding the salt completely and adding the herbs and spices? I also want to mention that we do recommend limiting alcohol intake. Again, research tends to show that too much consumption can also be carcinogenic, so you definitely want to limit that. And to piggyback a little bit on what Rosemary was saying is, we definitely want to be able to find that balance. What works for us? How am I feeling today? Can I take advantage and be mindful and make all those good choices? Or is today a day to self-indulge and maybe feed the soul, right? So being able to find those, and even something that you had said to me, writing it down, maybe keeping a little journal, all of those things might help us make better choices in the long run.
Absolutely. Some great points there. Now, Rosemary, next question's for you. What's some advice you have for someone who is just starting their cancer treatment and maybe having a hard time adjusting to their diet and lifestyle?
Well, when you're just starting, you really need to give yourself a break. Your body and soul are dealing with a lot of different things in a very short amount of time, and all of it can be a real challenge to maneuver. Really take it one day at a time, listen to what your body needs, and have just easy, healthy options available that aren't going to be too difficult to manage. I would absolutely recommend everyone see a nutritionist or a dietitian while they're starting off treatment, because they can really help make all of this so much easier by giving you those ideas and giving you recommendations that, when you're in chemo brain just does not let you function like a normal human being. And what seems really simple to someone is a real challenge. So having a nutritionist or a dietitian really make those clear points for you, write them down and keep them in a notebook is going to make a really, really big difference. And always bring in your family into the mix too, because when you're cooking for one person and you're the one that's eating these things and everyone else is eating other things that you would love to have, it makes it much more difficult. So when we made the decision to really move more vegetable forward, we all eat the same way. My daughter eats it, my husband eats it. So that way we're making meals for the whole family. And even for her, when she sees us eating like this, then she's less likely to want to eat like hot dog or that kind of a meal. So it's incorporating the whole family, and it'll be easier to get through it because you have that support system.
I love that point so much, because I'm sure often, family, friends, and loved ones around you want to ask, hey, how can I support you through this? And maybe that's something that you can say in that situation, is say, hey, let's go on this healthy eating journey together.
Absolutely.
I do want to follow up and ask, do you think nutrition had a role in your recovery?
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. When I really started to meal plan and focus on where I was lacking vegetables, I started to notice a difference very, very quickly in how I was feeling, joint pain, all those different things. I started having more energy. And then to the point where now when I do have that delicious burger or that fantastic steak, I don't feel so great afterwards because my body just is saying, hey, this is not the type of stuff that we want you to be eating. So, even though I like it, I don't feel the same afterwards. So you realize what it does to your body when you try to eat as clean as possible and then throw in a couple of things here and there.
Wonderful. And really, like all of you have said today, it sounds like it's about balance, right? We don't have to go one extreme or the other. This is a lifestyle change, and really committing to it and being consistent for the long term doesn't mean you need to deprive yourself all of the time.
Definitely not.
So now I want to turn to a couple of viewer questions. So the first one, and feel free, the floor is open to anyone and everyone to jump in here. What is the most important nutrition recommendation for cancer patients?
Wow, that's a big question.
I'm going to say that's a big question.
So again, I would say the most important nutrition question or recommendation would be, and again, everything that Rosemary has been saying is we want a whole food, plant-based diet. It doesn't have to be all of that, but being more plant-focused. How can I eat more plants? I don't like kale, but they're telling me to eat the kale. Okay, so what do you like? You like iceberg? Let's eat iceberg. You want it at breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Let's start there. Think about the little goals. Again, ask yourself, what can you do and how can you incorporate those things? What can you start staying away from? You know what? I don't need those 3 Coca-Colas. I can get away with 2. There's another victory. So really, looking into what you are doing every day and then being able to say, I can do this. I'm not ready for this. And taking those small victories one by one.
That's going to be much easier to sustain in the long term than just trying to go full force vegan at one shot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we want this to be lifelong, right? The way that we're really describing to eat is not specific to cancer patients. And big kudos to you, Rosemary, that you have a beautiful family that has, joined you in on this journey, because the truth is that everyone is benefiting from it because every one of us should be eating like that.
Very true.
Natasha, I'm so glad you said that because that kind of leads into our next viewer question here, which is, can eating a diet with plenty of fruits and vegetables or the whole food plant-based type of diet lower people's risk in developing cancer? So this is kind of focusing more on that preventative.
Absolutely. So when we look at the research, definitely our genes and our lifestyle in general, exercise, smoking, alcohol intake, all play a role in our risk for cancer. But really, who has the biggest risk factor is our diet. So yes, if we can change how we eat, no matter what age, we can definitely help prevent maybe even the aggression of a cancer. I'm not saying cancer completely, right? Because a lot of things fall into that, but maybe prevent how aggressive it can be. Maybe help me recover better. All of those things. Absolutely.
And I want to make sure I just heard this right, that the biggest risk factor is our diet.
When we tend to look at research and we look at the percentages, who is playing the biggest role, it's our diet intake.
Wow. Great information.
Yeah.
And does Chef Eddie, was there something you were going to add there?
No, I wanted to say that I agree with Natasha. I think that our diet is very important to how our body feels and how our body reacts to a lot of things, especially if there are things that are part of our genes. I'm gonna use myself as an example. A few months ago, I was becoming borderline diabetic, and I started changing my diet where I started limiting the consumption of sugars and drinking sodas and stuff like that, and changing to like bubbly and eating more vegetables and watching the meats and actually the times that I was actually eating. I used to eat a lot very late at night. So that was also affecting how my body was actually processing what I was putting into the body. And about a month ago, I went back to the doctor, and I'm actually not borderline diabetic anymore. So I think it's actually very important that you do watch what you put into your body and what you're eating. The amount of food that you're actually eating is very important, that you also break down the amount of food that you actually put into a plate, so that your body is actually able to process it in the time frame that it should be processing it, and actually using it to give your body fuel to do other things that you need to do.
That's wonderful news. Thanks for sharing that. I was actually going to ask you something along those lines, since you mentioned when you first started as a chef, you weren't really looking at labels and paying as close attention to the ingredients when you first started.
Yeah, no. And even when you cook at home, like when I was growing up, I've been cooking since I was about 12 years old. That's when my mother started showing me how to cook. And growing up, now I look at certain ingredients that my mom would use while she was teaching me how to cook, and I'm like, oh my God, this is not healthy at all for any of us. So and now I teach my family, listen, you need to look at this and the ingredient labels and stuff like that, so that I want to, so that we can live longer and not be at sick. So the most important thing is actually educating ourselves and educating the people that we love, our family and friends, to make sure that we make the smart choices when we actually go into the supermarket, and not putting any chemicals and things that was not meant for human consumption.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you all so much for sharing. As we wrap up, just a couple of quick closing questions. Rosemary, thank you for being so open about your personal journey. I just wanted, before we go, to ask how you're doing today.
I'm doing great. I'm on maintenance medication for a few more years, and I'm feeling really well, and finding that the food choices and exercise choices that I'm making really help combat those effects. So once I figured all that out, much better.
So glad to hear. And again, thank you for sharing. And to our panel, are there any final thoughts you want to leave our viewers with?
I would say start small. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can do it. Ask yourself, what can I do and what can I do? It's okay that you can't do something. Okay, put it on this list and just do what you can.
And I would suggest, don't go to the supermarket hungry. When you go hungry, you tend to buy a lot of stuff that you don't need, and you get attracted to a lot of fast food items that are actually at the supermarket or on your way to the supermarket. And also find people that are going to be a support system to yourselves, that actually encourage you and give you the support that you need, and probably join you along your process.
Absolutely. I love those takeaways, the support system, balance overall, little steps at a time. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And don't go to the grocery store hungry. Wonderful takeaways to leave our audience with. Thank you all so much for your insight today. And remember, viewers, be sure to hit that subscribe button on our channel here to keep up with the latest health and wellness information and tips from our experts. You can also connect with us on our social media channels. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and also LinkedIn. And check out our resource blog for the latest news at baptisthealth.net/news. You'll find the link there to all episodes of the Baptist Health Talk podcast as well. On behalf of everyone at Baptist Health, stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you for watching.